Here's a typical problem that involves finding a confidence interval for a standard deviation. Now, the big difficulty with doing these things with formulas and by hand, and especially using tables, is the tables are never accurate enough. Here we see that we have a sample of 40 cookies, so we know our degree of freedom n minus 1 is 39, but our table only lists 30 and then 40. It goes up in steps of 1 all the way up to 30, but then beyond that it does steps of 10. So you're stuck with having to use 40 as an approximation, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but it's a lot easier to just let technology do this for us. So instead of doing this by hand, and I recommend you do a couple of them by hand just to understand how they work and see how the formulas work. But after that, go ahead and let technology take over for you. So let's go to StatCrunch. We go Stat, Variance Statistics. Now please pay attention. This says variance statistics even though we're doing standard deviation questions. And this is going to become a very important distinction here in a second. All right, we've got one sample of data with summary because we have the summaries, right? We don't have raw data. All right, you'll notice that it asks for sample variance. That's what I meant by it's important to pay attention to it, because if you go back to the question, you'll notice that they list the standard deviation. So the first thing you have to do is take your standard deviation and square it so that you now have the variance. So go back here, put in that variance. All right, your sample size was 40. We're doing a confidence interval, and we need to figure out what size our interval is. It's 98%. So change this to 98. Hit compute. Here's our lovely little table of information, but again, the problem is this is a confidence interval for a variance, and we want a confidence interval for standard deviation. See, that's the symbol for standard deviation. So again, we have to do some simple math. We just have to take this number and take its square root, and this becomes our lower bound. Do the same thing for the upper limit. Again, taking its square root, and this becomes our upper limit, 3.21. And that's how you tackle these questions using StatCrunch.